Euro-Germany Compact with Africa program. The program will assist the country improve conditions for sustainable private sector investment, infrastructure, economy and employment. So those were our major news highlights. Up next is the big one. Please stay. Welcome back. Now, the Minister for Works and Housing, Samuel Appiah, says government will consider the construction of affordable housing units along tidal waves prevalent coastal communities in the country. He made this known when he visited some residents in the Ketu South municipality whose property were destroyed during the weekend's disaster.
Kusu, 186 households were badly affected, with residents having to seek shelter at the Blekusu RC Primary School.
Since yesterday, this thing started happening around 2 o'clock a.m. at dawn. And as I'm speaking to you now, people are still living homelessly.
The issue of tidal waves having to affect some communities in the Ketu South district of the Volta region is an annual affair. And for now, you can see behind me, this classroom block is going to remain sleeping place for these residents who were displaced following the tidal wave that struck the community of Blekusu. The entourage also visited the Amutinu Salekope community, where some 60 households were also affected. Interacting with the affected residents, the Minister for Works and Housing, Samuel Appiah, says a permanent relocation will be considered by government to avert a recurrence of the situation.
It is imperative that we deal with the issue of relocation, as I'm seeing it. If you are too close for comfort in terms of how the sea can attack your property, then it's better there's a relocation.
The minister and his team also visited the Keta Sea Defense Project, which work has stalled. According to the executive director of Amandi Limited, Dro Taha, the severity of the waves is affecting progress of work.
The idea is to create about 90 meters of new land to create this new natural barrier.
Briefing the media after the tour, the minister called for the relocation of the residents as government impressed upon the World Bank for support for the construction of affordable housing units in the area. He was quick to add that the ministry would ensure all previous affordable housing projects are completed.
As it stands now, our priority is to secure the completion of all uncompleted buildings. We want to do a massive affordable housing in which the rural areas will be taken care of, because the relocation might not be appealing for now, because where is the alternative? So we have to now give them the houses and say, please, you pay whatever, or you have to pay and go and live here. Then we take over, I mean the beaches.
Some companies also donated assorted items to the victims.
Right, let's do some analysis on this. Professor Kwesi Appiah Eni Ado is the head of the Department of Marine and Fisheries Science at the University of Ghana. He's joining us on the telephone lines. Good evening, Prof, and thank you extremely for your time.
Hello, good evening. And a very good evening to your listeners.
Great. So there have been concerns about the rise in tidal waves which has affected communities along the coast. Can you tell us whether there are any relationships between climate change and the increasing devastation that we're witnessing with the tidal wave onslaught along our coastal lines?
All right. Thank you very much. Yes, there is a relationship between what we are experiencing and then climate change. You know that climate change comes with a lot of activities, and these are some of the effects of climate change. We are experiencing sea level rise, and when you have a storm surge, and the storm surge coincides with high tide, these are some of the effects that we experience here. So we can attribute what we experience to climate change.
And I know that the basic thing we can think about when we think about solution is sea defense walls. Really, are sea defense walls the answer?
Sea defense walls are they are part of the solution, but I wouldn't say they are entirely the answer. Because once you put in a sea defense wall, you are also creating problems downdrift. You put in we have different types of sea defense structures. And once you put in a defense structure, it also comes with its own problems. So we may have to look for alternative ways.
Let's look at the problems of sea defense walls first, and then we'll discuss the alternatives. If you put in a sea defense, there was a sea defense structure in Keta and a couple of other places. What problems would that bring in addition to protecting the coastline?
You see, once you put in a sea defense like we have in Keta, Keta we have the groins and we also have revetment. Now the groin basically traps sediment and build the beaches. So in a local area, you solve the problem. But then once you trap the sediment, you are preventing sediment from moving to the lower side of the beach. And once that happens, you are starving that area, which we call the downdrift side of sediment. And once the downdrift side is starved of sediment, it results in, erosion. So sea defense is basically solving the problem at one point, but then transferring the problem from that location
to another side.
And that is what we are experiencing in some areas in Kenya.
So I know that government is considering relocation as part of the long-term solution to this crisis. But beyond that, we know sea defense, we know relocation is also good. But in between, what other options are available to still be able to protect the coastline and protect the residents who live along it also?
Yes, relocation is one of the options we could consider. But again, you relocate the people, but the problem is still there, So we have to look at the whole thing in a holistic approach. We could use other methods, In some areas, we could use windbreakers. We could use, introduce vegetation. In some areas, we could introduce other, measures where we could bring in sediment to nourish the beach. It's also one option that we can look at. But at the moment, relocating the people, reducing the stress, and reducing the stress is something we could look at. But I normally say that combining the hard engineering measures with the soft measures is something that we need to look at in this country.
We also know that
you've done hard engineering, but we should be looking at combining.
We also know that you have done quite a volume of work in this area, including articles, coastal erosion in Ghana, causes and effects, and all of that. We want to find out what your findings are pointing to as of now.
Yes, several issues are causative factors for coastal erosion in our country. Some are natural. Erosion is a natural phenomenon. You can't do anything about it. The system erodes, and after a period of time, it accretes. So it's a natural cycle. But the moment humans intervene within this natural phenomenon, then we sort of, affect the natural cycle. And once that happens, the system tries to reestablish equilibrium. And in doing so, we have some of these problems. The natural effect can be explained by so many issues. And then we also have the anthropogenic, which is human-induced. Some actions of, people living in the coastal areas or people away from the coastal areas are creating some of these problems. One is construction very close to the shoreline. It's something we need to do. We need to move away from the shoreline. We need to have setbacks. Once you have setback lines, we define where development should not go beyond, so that we free the coastal zone or the very near shore and allow the system to naturally evolve. Once the system is naturally evolving and is not in contact with development, we don't have any problem.
Right.
So that is one thing we need to look at. We also need to look at how we manage the coastal system. Coastal sand mining is something that is going on in a lot of places. Once we mine a sand, we are depleting the coastal area of sediment, and that is a critical thing in the coastal area. Once that happens, we have something we call the sediment budget. Once there's a deficit in the sediment budget, naturally the system wants to balance the equation. So these activities we need to stop. And then again, constructions within coastal areas, we really need to do a scientific study to find out how these constructions will impact the coastal system. You know, we don't just go and put structures within the coastal area. No. I always say that development in the coastal area or planning for the coastal area is different from planning for the hinterland, because the coastal issues are different and we must begin to look at them differently. So these are some of the things that we are doing and enhancing or exacerbating the effect of coastal erosion and flooding.
Right, Prof, we're grateful for your time. Professor Kwesi Appiah Ado is the head of Department of Marine and Fisheries Science at the University of Ghana. This is still News Hour here on TV3. You can also hear us on 3FM 92.7. Welcome back. Now, Ghana's effort in the fight against child labor has been described as unacceptable. An non-governmental organization, Global Rescue Project, told my colleague Peter Kwao Adato poverty and lack of political will are to be blamed for the slow pace of progress.
The UN Sustainable Development Goal 8 seeks to eliminate all forms of child labor by 2025. No child should be left behind in this. In Ghana, thousands of children are trapped in hazardous work on the Volta Lake. The Global Slavery Index Survey 2016 indicated that 21,000 children are forced to work in the fishing industry on the Volta Lake. Some of these children are as young as 4 years.
The government here has got to help the people on the islands especially so that they have a better way to survive. So if you eliminate poverty, then you help eliminate child trafficking.
Godfred dropped out of school at age 7. For 5 years, he has been on the lake fishing. Near Bakpakope in the Sene East district of the Bonohafo region, Godfred, together with David and Felix, engaged in fishing. David, now 21, has done this all his life. He now leads the two younger siblings, Felix 11 and Godfred 13. Just like David, their lives depend on the Lake Volta. These children aged between 5 and 13 were just about leaving for a second fishing expedition on Wednesday, June 7 at Oparama. The founder of Global Rescue Project, Le Stenzel, who has been on the lake for the past 5 years, campaigning and rescuing children, has encountered many of these scenarios. Until the traffickers, slave masters and parents who give out their awards are brought to justice, thousands of children will continue to risk their lives on the Volta Lake each day.
Heard in earlier stories on this network, the Ghana National Association of Teachers has been in the forefront of the fight against child labor. We're joined in the studio tonight by Head of Membership Education Department of NAT, Thomas Musa, to throw some more light on the challenge and how they think we can address it, sedation. Good evening, sir. Thank you. We're grateful that you could join us. How are you, sir?
Fine, and you?
I'm fantastic. So this child labor issue, how would you describe the situation in Ghana?
Yes, I think we first have to ask ourselves, when we say child labor, what are we talking about? It has to do with work or economic activity carried out by persons below the age of 18 years, which is injurious, dangerous to their health, safety, and well-being, which hinders their education and personal development. And to that extent, we must ensure that it doesn't happen in Ghana.
But it's still happening.
It's still happening in Ghana.
And would you say the situation is bad, worse, or it's gone out of hand in Ghana?
Certainly, the statistics before us is not good at all. If you look at the Ghana Labor Standard Survey 2014 indicates that we are talking about approximately 2 million children are into child labor. That is, of every 5 children you see in Ghana, 1 is to child labor. And that is not good enough. Because if we are investing in the the colleges of education, we are investing in the Ministry of Education, we are investing in preparing teachers and all that.
Then why?
And the teachers and the children are not going to school. Then of what benefit will it be to the nation?
But I know, I mean, as we talk about this, we're also looking at apportioning blame. Who should we blame? The parents, the educational system? I know in Ghana we have universal basic education, and children are supposed to go to school. So if they are not in school, then who is to blame?
I think at this point, to go with the blame game will not help us. We need to, social partners, see what we can do to get the whole thing done. At least by 2020, as this particular, the 2017 team indicates that, how do you call it, that in conflicts and disasters, protect children from child labor, mobilizing resources for effective implementation of the National Plan of Action Part 2 between 2016 to 2020. So I think this is an era of partnership and coming together to ensure that we mobilize resources to
so
get to the whole
basically
thing.
We have to stop the blame game.
Yes,
Thomas
please.
Musa, I'll have you hold briefly. I'll go on to the telephone lines. Okay. I have George Achibra, who is with a community development program at PACODEP. He's joining us on the telephone lines. Ms. Achibra, good evening. We're grateful for your time. Thank you very much. Now, I know that you are obviously, like many Ghanaians, concerned about the trend of child labor in the country. I mean, we also need to find out the role families and teachers all play in this. What's your view where you stand and how you are observing it?
Thank you very much, my good brother, and to your listeners and viewers. I think I'm so grateful I've joined you online this evening. Child labor and its wrongdoings, my view is that I think we all need to put all hands on deck, all stakeholders and institutions, most especially the government of Ghana, and various institutions must all try to play a role to see how we can safeguard this kind of manners. It has not been very well with us because if at this age of the aging world where we are now going through and we asking our children to get into employment or an industry, most especially when it is very illegal and considered very, very exploitative, then it's not the best for us. So I think we all need, it's a role that we have to play. Otherwise, the country is going to lose people who are going to inherit us tomorrow. And
I know that as a teacher, although you're involved in the program community development, as a teacher, we all know that teachers have a role to play by teaching. And so naturally some will say, why are you concerned about child labor, especially when there are laws in this country that must insist that that child is in school?
That is where we are coming from. Because if you look at the conventions of the UN Convention on the Importance of the Children, where our country, Ghana, was about the first to ratify this kind of convention, I see it necessary because the early planners and the visionaries of our country who even put their pen into this realize that they need to safeguard. So as a teacher, what will the teacher, who is the teacher going to teach? As my good brother Thomas Musa rightly put it, we need to protect them because as much as we produce teachers, we need to also know as best that if we produce teachers, they must take our best children into a very good direction. So therefore, as a teacher, it behoves on us so that we also try to see how best we can educate the community and people around, parents, whoever is concerned. Because if you give birth, that the very moment you give the child, it belongs to the whole nation.
Right.
And the nation must also try to put the child into a good direction.
Right, Ms. Achibra, we're grateful for your time. Thank you very much. George Achibra is with the Community Development Agency, PACODEP. I still have Mr. Musa in studio. There are many parents who attribute this to poverty. I know some experts have said the poverty argument is neither here nor there, but we still have poverty endemic in our societies, and you think if we fix the problem of poverty, we can fix the problem of child labor?
Yeah, Steve, I think this is a very important issue that you've raised. For the whole of last week, we visited some of the islands in the Senate East District. And our findings were profound. Of all the 38 islands over there, they told us that not a single school has a school feeding program. And some of the children we met below the ages of 5 to 17, by 12 noon, they've not eaten. And some of them have to work the whole day before even eating around 5, 6 p.m. the whole day. So if because of food, this child cannot go to school and the child has to go and work, then it means that we have to extend the school feeding program. So if the child is assured that if I go to school, at least I can get lunch there to eat, instead of going to fish or going to work, the child will leave it and go to school.
Because they are fishing just to eat.
Certainly. Some of them, they just want to put body, soul, and spirit together. Okay, that is, meeting their safety needs.
So you are part of the school of thought who
Yes.
believe that poverty is part of this problem.
You see, when we say poverty, when we want to stress on poverty, then we push it rather on the parents. We are saying that we have an intervention called school feeding program.
We should let that work.
Yes, so we should send it to those
motivate
areas.
the children to be in school.
The other things I want to mention quickly before...
Right, my time is up.
Yes, so let me mention this. If there are promises in the budget. The government has promised to construct 1,171 KG schools within the next 4 years. And for this year, 200 schools to be built. We are also told in the budget that the attrition rate in Ghana now is about 7,000 teachers per annum, and something must be done about it. When we visited the place, we have about 4 teachers in one room. That is terrible. Yeah. And we think that something must be done. Mr. Thomas Musa, we're grateful for your time. Thank you very much. And God bless you.
Thank you very much. That's appreciated. My name is Stephen Enti, and that's how we draw the curtains for News at 10, which came to you live from the News Hub at Addis Ababa. We're also live on 3FM 92.7. Thank you very much for making time. On behalf of the crew here, good night.